Okay, so I'm going to be talking to you about food waste and why it's such a big problem, and lots of tips actually on how to reduce food waste. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to read a little bit of a writing from a paragraph from the website wrap.org.uk. Now, like with any facts, it is important to try and get your facts from good quality resources, and wrap is one of those. So I'm going to read this bit to you so you can see the impact that food waste is really having. So WRAP estimates that annual food waste arising within UK households, hospitality and the food service, food manufacturer, retail and wholesale sectors in 2018 was at around 9.5 million tonnes of waste. 70% of this was the food that was intended for the consumer, for people, and then the 30% was the inedible parts. This in total had a value of around £19 billion a year and would be associated with more than 25 million tonnes of greenhouse gas emissions. Over 85% by its weight of this waste food arises in households and food manufacture. Although food arising in one part of the supply chain is certainly influenced by other parts of the chain. That's a big amount of food waste in regards to actual food waste, the emissions, the carbon footprint, the emissions that are wasted, and the money that is wasted. So food waste is a massive problem. So we're going to be talking a little bit about some tips on how to reduce that. Now, any of you that know me will know that food waste is something that I am trying to always improve on. And I think there's elements that you have to take into account or factors that you take into account that make it trickier. So in my personal circumstances, I have 3 young children. 2 of them are 2. And so they don't understand about food waste like I do. But I do still teach them about composting and where to put the food waste. But ultimately, it's very difficult to have an intelligent conversation with a 2-year-old about why we eat what's on our plate rather than keep changing their mind for a different dinner, and trying to get them to understand that I don't want them to have 4 different foods on the go at one time, and that I want them to eat their whole apple rather than eating one bite of it. Like, those are conversations that are very difficult to have with young children. So ultimately what I am learning is that you have to try and stop it at the root. So I have got locks on my cupboards, and when I remember to use them, it makes life easier because the children just can't help themselves to loads of different foods. And other things that I've learned along the way is that rather than giving them a whole fruit to eat, and apples can be really quite big for young toddlers and bananas can come really big, is I buy small bananas, or I only give them the option of a cut banana. So I've got twins, so it's quite easy because I can say, do you want a banana? Do you want a banana? Normally it's yes. If one wants them, the other one wants them, and then I say, okay, I'm going to give you a cut banana. And although there were issues with that, and there were definitely tantrums about having a cut banana at first, the more it became normal, they just accepted that. So therefore they had half a banana each. Or I get ready to have a banana smoothie with their leftovers. So it is trying to figure out your personal circumstances and how you can reduce food waste. So like any eco challenge, what's right for me might not be right for you, and vice versa. So I'm going to talk to you about a few different tips that I have learned and that I am still working on myself. So there is no judgment here with anything that we do here at Eco Essex. We are all on a journey and we are all learning. So firstly, look at your perishables. Which food is going off or is going to go off soon? Make sure those bits are visible within your fridge. So are they in your eye line perhaps? Are they at the front of the shelf? Have you made a purposeful note to make note of those ones to go on a food board, a menu for the week, for example? Some people can have a box, so you can have a label on it saying eat me first or something like that, and anything that's about to go off you can put in there, so that anybody that goes in the fridge for a snack or wants to prepare dinner, they go to that bit first. When you then go shopping for food, rather than putting your new food at the front, bit like a shelf, if you were stacking a shelf at the supermarket, you would always bring the food to the front first and you would stock at the back. So it should be the same with your fridge. Another really interesting thing is a bit like your home, and how we know that the more cluttered our home is, the more difficult it is to find stuff. And I think that's the same for cupboards and fridges and freezers. I often go to my freezer and just open the door and go, there's nothing to eat, and the freezer's full. And it is slightly psychological, and also it's a bit of laziness, like I can't be bothered to rummage through it all because it all falls out. So I think having a less cluttered space will make it easier to find things. And also labelling. So I sometimes buy food from a refill shop. I bought some beans a few months ago, but I didn't make note of what beans they were. So then a few weeks later, I think it was a couple of months later, I then forgot even what they were, and then that's put me off using them because I'm like, I don't even know what they are, let alone how to cook them or what recipe to have. So labelling can be really useful as well. Another really simple tip is using containers that you can see in. So if you put food in, say like an ice cream tub, and put that in the fridge, you can't see what's in it, so it's going to be really easy to forget what's in it. Whereas if it's clear, a glass container or one of those like a plastic Tupperware or something, then you can see what's in it instantly. So that's much better when it comes to kind of actually visibly seeing stuff and making a decision on what you want to eat. Freeze foods. Freezing is obvious, but I often think we forget about foods that we can freeze that we might not have thought of. Like things like vegetables, we know that we can freeze them because we can buy frozen vegetables, we can buy frozen fruit. So if you've got, say, like blueberries going off, doesn't happen in my house because they get eaten in a few seconds, but if you had something like that was going off because they don't last particularly well, freeze them. I can buy frozen blueberries, so what's the difference? So looking at how you can freeze your food, or if something like canned vegetables, for example, much better if than buying fresh, for example. If you don't eat vegetables a lot, for example, or your kids don't, then it's just another way of buying them without them going off in the fridge, and then looking at freezing them after you've opened a can. A tip I've learned talking about berries is another way to keep some of your bits fresher is to look at the container that you store them in, and using things like glass jars can be a better way of storing things. And you can buy things to go at the bottom of your fridge to kind of help. I think it's to help with the airflow, like a little sponge thing at the bottom of the fridge. So if you put fruit and veg at the bottom of your fridge drawer, for example, it's still getting the airflow around, so you're not going to get that flat, bruised, like rotten areas in your fruit and veg. And things like bananas, I think they release a gas which then makes all the other fruit around it ripen really quickly, so keeping your bananas separate, for example. Also looking at things like if you wanted to go to kind of the next level of looking at your waste, you could do like a food waste audit. So you could actually, every time you throw something away, you could make a note of it, like how much would that have cost to buy, or how much portion is that I've just thrown away, and what is it? And it might be that within a week you've really got hold of like some real traits that are happening in your family home, of like regular things that keep happening. You're like, oh, my kids keep chucking away, I don't know, a chicken nugget each a day. Well, that means I'm probably giving them too much food. So you might be able to get some idea of why you're getting that food waste and what you might be able to do about it. The other thing is like going to the shops to get your bargains, like late at night or first thing in the morning, and you get the food that's going off. Great way of getting bargain food as well, as long as you're happy to kind of eat it immediately, or obviously freeze it immediately as well. So that's another way. The other things to bear in mind, the difference between best before and use by. Use by is a much more serious date to consider. If it says use by, then it could go off and it could actually make you ill if you don't eat it by that time. But best before is just what it means. It's just best. It's best before that day. It's going to taste nicer today than it will do if you eat it next month. But we all know, I'm sure we've all heard of it, that we've all had stuff in our cupboards that's like years out of date, as in best before, but things are still usable. So use your common sense. So like, this is what they used to do in the olden days. People didn't have these dates. People used their common sense, and I think we've forgotten that. You know, use your scent, use your taste. You know, taste a little bit of it. As I say, smell it, look at it. You know, and then decide. So use your common sense to look at best before dates. Also, there's some really good apps. Olio is one of those apps which was designed to reduce food waste, and you register on an app, or I think on the website as well perhaps, and then basically you share food waste with your neighbours, local people. Like, so if you don't want something and it's going to go off soon, rather than you knowing you're not going to use it in the next couple of days, offer it to a neighbour. And then there's another app which is great for businesses, like cafes and pubs, and that's called Too Good To Go. And that way businesses can register their like meals that are going to go off. So they might have, I don't know, 10 rolls left before the end of the day. They want them gone, and they sell them at a reduced price to get rid of them and reduce their food waste. So it's a good way of you getting some cheap food as well. So register with both of those apps. When it comes to food planning, that meal planning idea, there's different ways of doing it, and for me it doesn't work if I plan for a whole week. And that's partly because I'm not the best at working out portion control, but also I have young kids, and their predictability of what they want to eat and how hungry they are is really hard to judge. One day they might eat 3 sausages, another day they might not want any. So I have to kind of, for me, what works is doing food planning day by day. So the best way for me is I look at what food I have left over at the end of the day, and if I have loads of sausages left over, if I food plan immediately for the next day and I put tomorrow on the board leftover sausages with whatever. Other people much prefer to plan for a whole week, and then they will buy the food for those exact recipes. So there's no right or wrong way, but using food planning in whatever works for you can be a really useful way to reduce food waste as well. Other thing to think about is overripe foods, like again, bananas that are going early overripe still make quite good smoothies as well. Or you might have lemon rinds that you don't know what to do with. You could grate it, for example, so that in a recipe where you need like lemon zest, you have it there ready. So looking at what you can do with foods as well. You might be that you have some veg going off, you might be able to make it into a soup, for example. So looking for other purposes for it. Also looking for things that you can do, so with like potato skins, you can make snacks, you can make crisps out of those. And again, all of this depends on how much time you have. I admit I don't have a loads of time, and the time I do have I prioritise for other things, and the time I've got with the kids, which is like 12 hours a day, I find it too stressful to have 3 young kids in the kitchen trying to help me, and so it really is whatever's going to work for you. Obviously, lastly, is composting. And the reason I kind of can't call it lastly is because when we think about the waste hierarchy, which if you've watched some of my other previous workshops or videos, you might have heard me talking about this. The waste hierarchy is like a triangle of concepts, I suppose, or the overall triangle is a concept about what is and how do we reduce our waste in general. And we think about things like landfill and incineration and things that are rotted as the last resort. And composting, you could argue, is rotting, even though you might reuse that compost, obviously for your garden, for example. It is considered still one of the worst last resorts, okay? So looking, like we've talked about, all those other options for reusing food, you might want to rehome it to somebody else, you might want to reuse it for a different purpose, for example. But composting is obviously a really good option instead of throwing it. So for example, if you put food in your general waste, if it goes into landfill, then you basically what happens is that food that then decomposes and decays releases methane gas, which is one of, if not the worst gas for carbon, our carbon emissions as such. So you don't want that. We don't want methane released into the atmosphere. So, and that is what happens if food goes into landfill. Now, lots of places now don't have, lots of councils don't use landfills anymore. It goes to incineration. But again, you know, that food's just going to therefore be incinerated instead, where it could be broken down as such and used into making compost. So you want it to go in the compost option, your green option in your council. Now, there are some councils which I find shocking over the UK that still don't have a green waste option. If that is the case for you, I would fight that, and I would contact your council about the necessity of that service. But also look into council. If you can't council use your make a compost, you can't send it off for their composting scheme, then do your own compost. So you can compost down things like food waste, like organic food waste. I don't mean organic as in you buy it organic carrots, but I mean like actual fruit and vegetables. So not processed food, not cooked food, but like organic matter. So you can put your grass and your leaves and stuff like that in it as well, but all your vegetable peelings and fruit peelings and things like that. You can buy compost bins. I think they're called hot bins. There are such things that you can compost all food, but it definitely has to be a separate system, and it's not just a bog standard compost bin. So look at composting as one of the last options. There is actually a app, I think it's called Share Waste, I think it's called, where you can actually share compost with people as well, which sounds weird, but for compost to be good quality when it's broken down, like for next year or something, you don't want it all to be leaves or all to be grass or all to be banana skins. It needs to be a component and a good mixture of what we call green and brown waste. So if you were only putting in one type of waste, it's not going to be a good compost next year for your garden. So you can share waste with other people local to you, which is great. So do look that up as well. So I hope it's been useful. Always keen to hear about what changes you make and what other ideas you have, because there are loads of ways to reduce waste, but I felt like this was enough tips for now. So I hope that's been useful. Bye for now.